Hello and welcome to Toolbox for the Trades. My name is Amanda Salvatore, and today I speak with Tim Johnson, president of Tim Johnson Landscaping in North Carolina. We discuss lessons learned from strategic restructuring, hiring effective leaders, and being prepared for sustained long-term success, including how to shift from working in the business to working on the business. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Tim Johnson, you are the president of Tim Johnson Landscaping, located in North Carolina. And today we are discussing your approach to growth strategy. Welcome to Toolbox for the Trades.
Thanks for having me on.
Before we really get into it, we always like to start with a little bit of an icebreaker here on the podcast. And I know that peer groups have really helped you shape your business. So, what is the best advice you've received from your peer group?
There's so much gold that I have taken back from peer group meetings. If I had to narrow it down, it's really two things, and they're really related to each other, and they relate to building the sales team and the accountability from top to bottom in the business. And that is, the first one is the budget has to be realistic. The budget can't be a dream. The budget has to be something that you can hold your team accountable to. And the second part of that is then in turn, if the budget's going to be realistic, you have to build the org chart for the team that you want, not the team that you have.
I think we'll probably try to dive into that a little bit later because I love that idea of anticipating and preparing and making sure you're set up for success for when growth happens. But first and foremost, let's get into how you found yourself in the industry.
I was about 12, played baseball with guys that were older than me. I had been to the high school practice that day, and one of the kids on the team had got a brand new car for their 16th birthday. And in probably a little bit more of an entitled manner than I intended for it to be, I went and asked my dad what he was going to buy me when I turned 16. I will remove some of the colorful words and tell you that he said that I was going to have the opportunity to drive vehicles that they owned when they weren't using them. But if I wanted a vehicle of my own, I needed to figure out a way to buy it. And we started mowing neighbors' grass, and kind of the rest is history. I played college baseball, played a very short time in the Rockies organization after, was originally going to be an engineer, but along the way realized that I didn't like being inside that much, even though I'm inside most of the time now. I love landscaping. I love horticulture. I love being outside. When I transferred schools for baseball, I transferred to get my horticulture degree to really lay the foundation for what has become Tim Johnson Landscaping today.
So you start this company and there is significant growth happening. I know that you said that you were growing about 30% or more for 7 or 8 straight years. What was that experience like?
It was fun. It was crazy. I say it was at a size that it was reasonable, but I don't know that it's unreasonable at any size if it's structured properly, if it's planned properly, if it's calculated. To give some context to this, I mowed neighbors' grass. That's all it was. And that was really all it was ever going to be. So then Dad retired from the insurance business. He had a history in fertilizer way back in the late 60s, early 70s, but had retired out of the insurance business. And when I went off to college, he started mowing a little bit of grass, kept mowing the properties that I was mowing before I left. And so when I came back in 2009 from my very short professional baseball stint, it was him and I, and we came up with a part-time guy pretty quickly, but that was it. And it wasn't, if I'm being honest, it probably wasn't full-time for the two of us at that point in time. So when I say we grew 30+% a year, we grew from startup essentially 30 to 40% a year for 6 to 7 years in a row, maybe a little bit longer than that. And then we just saw that we were outpacing the team that we had in place.
What was the indicator to you, other than that you really needed to start pumping the brakes and start restructuring?
You know, I think it was a little bit of good outside advice. It felt like things were going 1,000 miles an hour. We just realized that for this to be sustainable long term, we had to build the team that took us to the next level. Now, I'm sure we'll get into this. I don't know that I would do what I have done over the last 24 months in the same manner that I've done it, but I'm glad we did it. And I'm excited for 26 and forward because there's some really great things happening at TJL.
Can you walk us through maybe the most critical structural change that you implemented during this 2-year period?
It was developing the org chart more than anything. So we moved to our current headquarters location in 2014. In 2014, the only management Tim Johnson Landscaping had was me and my dad. About 2018, we hired our first account manager. And so it was one of those things where we had grown so much by saying yes. And we just realized that it's hard to bring in people to manage teams that don't understand quality expectations, culture of a business, and how we run by our core values. And so we really had to start developing that next group of leaders and really building the team that could replace themselves as they move forward. And so that really gets us into about 5 years ago. Well, it started about 6 years ago when we realized that we were the lowest technology landscape company on the face of the earth. And everything was still on pen and paper and some really bad spreadsheets. And we realized that we couldn't scale because we couldn't create repeatable systems. And so through the process of interviewing software companies and ultimately landing with Aspire, we hired Steve Steele to help consult for us. And Steve really helped us look at that and develop that. And interestingly enough, through our implementation of Aspire is where we identified our first leader beyond the account manager, project manager level, which is Bill, who's been with us for years. And we were in there in an implementation meeting and he walked out, grabbed lunch or something. And Steve looked at Dad and I and he said, "You realize he's not an account manager, right?" And I was like, "I do, but I don't really know what that looks like." And he's like, "Well, you need to figure it out. The title is probably Director of Field Operations." And that's how we ended up with our first Director of Field Operations. And so through that, then we get into this last kind of 24-month period where right around the beginning of COVID, we had opened up Charlotte location, had, if I'm being honest, multiple failures down there from a leadership perspective, and realized that we either had to fully commit to developing a leadership team in Charlotte, or we had to just be a really big company out of one location. Bill earned another promotion. And so Bill's now titled as Vice President of Operations. And we have 2 branch managers underneath him. So the Statesville branch manager, Charlotte branch manager report through him. And that's part of that structure that becomes scalable, becomes repeatable, and helps breed accountability up and down the org chart. And so that was a big part of that, is building that team, building that leadership team out. And then, of course, building out the sales team that helps us not just be order takers, but be a little bit more tactical.
I want to talk about leadership. What does good leadership look like to you?
So we run EOS as a company. Read the book Traction by Gino Wickman. Great book. So much to learn in there. And for people who haven't read the book, there's nothing earth-shattering in there. It's a bunch of stuff that you knew you probably should be doing, organized in a way that you can actually do it. And through that, we better defined our leadership team. Now our leadership team has a book club. And it's funny, when we first started doing it, they'll probably argue with me when they listen to this podcast, but when we first started doing it, they were not very excited about it. And now we argue about what book we're reading. So we just got through the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership and have now started Good to Great as a team. We read a chapter a week and compare that. And you see all these things on LinkedIn or on Instagram about the difference between a boss and a leader, but it's so true. A leader serves, a leader facilitates, a leader teaches, a leader works side by side with their team. They make people better. They don't just take that position of authority and say, do this because I said so. They help people understand not only why we do things as a landscape company, but why do you get out of bed in the morning? If you can help somebody understand what their purpose is and why they get out of bed in the morning, the landscape part's really easy.
So I want to talk about, you had this 2-year period, you're pumping the brakes, you're taking into stock your leadership and other systems that can make you run more efficiently. When we previously spoke, you had said that after those 2 years, getting the wheels spinning again was difficult. It was hard to build that momentum. What specific advice would you give to another owner considering a pause to prepare for this reacceleration phase?
Mike Haynes came and did a outside speaking session for us at our strategic planning meeting 2 weeks ago. And he phrased it probably better than I ever have. And that is, we can change the tire while we're driving down the road. And as crazy as that sounds, my theme for our strategic planning meeting was massive action. And so what happened is, by pumping the brakes, people got comfortable. It wasn't laziness, it was just comfort. And it was a little bit of the fear of the unknown. And so now we've already pushed through that. I dropped a couple big accounts on them mid-season, and we're in that cycle and we're pushing forward, and it's exciting. And now that we have kind of pushed through that, got the flywheel spinning, they're starting to realize how much fun it is and they want more. And it's one of those things we talk to each other about, holding all of ourselves accountable, not just from the top down, but with our peers and everything else. So again, another part of EOS is to-dos. There's weekly to-dos. It goes back to whether it's in EOS or whether it's a conversation we have with each other. If I tell one of our AMs, or if I tell one of our business developers, hey, I'm going to do this thing for you, they need to just be able to move on and not think twice about it. Same thing, if they tell me they're going to do this thing, I need to be able to move on, trust that it's going to be done. And it's not just the, hey, wait 7 days and tell me you didn't get it done. It's no, after 3 or 4 days, you see your schedule, you see it's not getting done, call the person and say, hey, was that a hard deadline? I'm a little bit behind. I need a little bit of help with this. And just that collaborative effort of working together and holding each other accountable and having that trust with each other is a huge aspect of that.
It sounds like you're creating a safe space for people to come and say, I haven't gotten to this yet. How can we make this happen? As opposed to kind of shrinking back and becoming a little bit more hesitant to get through and make these things happen.
Well, right. And ultimately, it all leads to actions not taken, ultimately lead to customer service that is not to the expectation that we would want it to be. Whether it is an internal conversation or an external conversation, ultimately, everything we're doing is setting up to how are we taking care of our customer. And so if we're not taking care of each other, we can't be ultimately taking care of our customer. When we go into our quarterly EOS meetings, I make it clear up front. If I'm not doing something right, you hold me accountable to the same level that I'm going to hold you accountable. It doesn't matter who's boss of who, where we are in the org chart. We all have to hold each other accountable to do what's best for our team and our client. And if our client is happy, our team's probably happy. If our team's happy, our client's probably happy. And it's just one of those cycles that really play into each other.
Now, I know you had mentioned it a little bit before when we were talking, where you said that you kind of shifted from these order takers picking up the phone and taking any job that came your way. And you switched from that to a more tactical ticketed sales focus. How did you make that transition?
I mean, I think if we're being honest, we're still making that transition. But the saying that I share with our team, and I'm sure I heard at least part of this somewhere, I rarely come up with a ton of things on my own. I compile really good information and try and put it together. We got to $10 million by saying yes. We will get to $20 million and beyond by saying no. We have to understand what we're really good at, how we serve our client well. The other part of the conversation that I'm not scared to say out loud is what parts of that we can do and make money. We have to turn a profit. Profit funds growth for our team. It funds opportunity for our team. And without that, you're going to be stuck. And so I don't think profit is a dirty word. And I think it's something that we should all probably do a better job of being a little bit more open and honest about.
You also touched on this a little bit earlier about, really setting up the org chart and having those positions filled by good leaders. What else would you say to an owner who's really interested in working on the business as opposed to working in the business?
So I'm a doer. It's hard. I mean, there's the first thing, right? Let's admit, for everybody that says you have to work on the business and not in the business, it's hard. It is hard to let go of those things. it starts with a little bit of self accountability, right? You have to let go, and you just have to trust people to do things. And I got caught. So part of this massive action thing we're working on is I told our people, I was like, hey, let's not fall victim to, analysis paralysis or everything having to be perfect before we do it. Just get started. Just do it. So what is the thing as an owner that you are doing that somebody could do as well or better than you, that's not something you enjoy doing, that you can hand off to somebody, hand it off? And I did that in several phases. So Bill took a lot of the day-to-day operations things, but I kept construction. Well, I was doing construction management. I was doing estimating. I was doing the purchasing. I was basically a construction division manager in addition to being an owner of a business. One of the bigger things that I knew that we could build a repeatable system, because we have the tools in Aspire to do it, was I could offload estimating. And then when I offloaded estimating, I was going to be able to offload purchasing, because anybody who's doing a proper construction estimate should source their material on the front end. And so if your material's already sourced, purchasing isn't a big deal. And then we brought in a production manager or a project manager and just kept building those things forward. And I took on a lot. I had still kept a lot of the big maintenance estimating. And as of last month, we've hired a maintenance estimator now. And so it's all these little things that I know are keeping me from my highest and best use. Every time that we get to a point that we can offload part of that to somebody who that can be their focus and they can own it and do it better than me, then we're going to hand that off. And that works up and down the org chart too.
You brought up technology. I have to ask, how have you been leveraging technology in your business?
A ton, and we're going to be doing more and more. And so we've come such a long way. As I said, in 2019, we were a pen and paper company. So now we're using, obviously we're using Aspire, we're using Azuga, we're using Property Intel, implementing into Marketing Pro now. And the big thing for us, when we interviewed a software company, or we interviewed multiple software companies, we said, hey, whatever we're going to do is going to cost a fair amount of money. We need to pick something that we can fully invest into and run our entire business in. And so we really leverage that. Aspire itself doesn't fix your problems, but it gives you the framework to be able to fix your problems. And so we went in and we built the SOPs. And so now, we still do a production ride, but that property is getting entered in Property Intel. And especially on the construction side, it's been huge for us. We do the takeoff and we load plan in Property Intel. We do the takeoff in Property Intel. That syncs into our estimate in Aspire. That estimate produces that proposal, and it streamlines the process. That same estimate inside each item, you can select the vendor you're getting the plant material from. When that job's won, all you got to do is basically click a couple of boxes and your POs are created, because you've already done that legwork. And it just streamlines the processes. We're highly leveraging site audits. We just redid our site audit in the current site audit, and I was at Ignite a few weeks ago. I'm excited for site audits 2.0, but all of our site audits have enhancement suggestions in them. Whenever we send those site audits to a client already knows the areas in which we can improve the property. We manage our fleet in Aspire. And so all of those pieces of technology that get rid of paper, that streamline processes, we, for all intents and purposes, have the same number of office staff at 9+ million that we had when we went in Aspire at 4.5 to 5 million. And so that's where the technology allows us to scale and to build without having to add the headcount that doesn't produce revenue.
It allows you to work on the business as opposed to in the business. You kind of have some automations and things that are available to you so that you can breathe a little bit and focus on what's really important to you.
Well, and there's two things I probably need to add to that too, and it's about the visibility of the data, right? So before we had Aspire, we could hide from the numbers because the numbers they were on a piece of paper somewhere. You could interpret differently over here. Now we know we're on this property for X number of hours. We have spent this much money on material, and we know exactly what we have. And then in turn, both of our offices, we have big dashboards set up in there. And so in Statesville, we have 6 55-inch screens on a wall. Charlotte, we have 3 because it's a little bit smaller branch. Every foreman has a dial that shows their production efficiency. the account managers, their retention rates, their site audit rates, all of those things are on the wall for everybody to see so that they take that pride. And when we first did it, our numbers, especially on the maintenance production side, our numbers weren't good at all. But that foreman that was on the bottom of that list, he wasn't going to stay there very long. He was going to work his way up the list. The person that was top dog wanted to stay top dog. And so it created a little bit of fun and friendly competition and really made us all better. But at the end of the day, we had the data to understand where and how we needed to manage and get better.
So, what's next for Tim Johnson Landscaping?
I am so excited about where we are right now. I mean, it has been a battle to build the sales team. That is one of those things with Dad having been in the insurance business, having worked his way up to being a regional manager and having 150 agents working under him at one point in time, that we said, when it's time to build a sales team, that's going to be the easy part. And it has not been. And we have got 2 rock star business developers on our team now. Our AMs are doing a great job with their enhancements. And so I'm excited for this rocket ship to start back up and to get back on this train of 20, 25, 30% growth on an annual basis and continue to build opportunities for our people.
I have to ask, with the sales team, what seemed to be the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome?
I think it was a twofold thing. I think part of it was we probably settled in a couple of cases, but I think more importantly, we hadn't, again, I always assume I'm the problem, and we hadn't built the process to support them for them to be successful. So after our last, what I will call epic failure of a business developer, Bill and I decided, hey, we're going to meet offsite every week. So we went offsite, just the 2 of us, from 10 to 2 for basically a year. We started with the EOS implementation, and then we built out our sales playbook. And we just said, hey, we have got to have a structure, and we have got to give our business developers the tools they need to be successful. Here's the thing that no owner wants to admit. It is a whole lot easier for me as Tim Johnson to go sell when it says Tim Johnson on the shirt than it is for one of our people to go sell. And so, we built the playbook out. It's got objections in it. It's got what we do well. It's got what our targets are, who our target personas are. It's got our workflows on how we start from beginning to end so that we turn those proposals around quickly. That's another piece of technology we're implementing. We're trying to get all maintenance, no matter how large it is, we're trying to get all maintenance proposals turned around in 72 hours or less. We're under a week now. We think we're going to be to 72 hours by the first of the year. And I'm not sure that we can't get 48 hours on large and under 24 on small. But building out the workflows and the touches so that they understand these are the things we have to do, working through the close rates and the conversion rates and all of those things so they know, hey, generally speaking, if I'm doing my job at a high quality, if I talk to this many people and make this many proposals, we're going to close this amount of work, so that they know what the target is when they're coming in. And then the other part is you got to be brutally honest in our business about what the sales cycle is. If a new business developer thinks, that's from outside the industry, thinks they're going to come in and sell much of anything in the first 3 to 6 months in commercial landscape maintenance, nobody's being honest with themselves if that's the case. You have to build the relationship. It's one of the beautiful things about our business. The landscape industry is still so relationship based. So you have to build that trust. You have to have people that frankly trust us enough to say, hey, it's going to be 3, 6, maybe even 9 months, depending on when they start in the cycle. But as long as you're doing the things you need to do, as we've laid out, we're going to trust you. We're going to continue to invest in you, and it's going to pay off.
Just for clarification, sales team, sometimes it's going to take them a little bit longer to develop that trust and to land those sales. So how do you keep up that morale for your team?
It's a twofold thing. I think the first part is to understand the cycle, right? So our market is not as strict as a lot of markets, especially the more seasonal markets. All of those contracts renew at the same time. And so if they start right after those renewals happen, it takes that full cycle for them to get back and get an opportunity to make a sale. Our market is a little bit more flexible because we're year round. We find that the best properties are still on that kind of annual contract. And so it's budget season right now, right? So you better be hitting it hot and heavy right now to get those sales that are going to close in December, January, February. But at the same time, it's to hiring somebody that you trust enough to invest a little bit more money in, from the perspective of, I actually offered this to both of our BDs. One of them said, if I take that, I'm telling you that I don't trust myself enough to sell it. The other one said, I want money. And I think they're both right. And so what we did was we just said, hey, this is the base salary we offer BDs. This is the commission structure that we offer BDs. And so the one guy, we worked with him and he said, hey, that's a little bit below what I'm used to. How can we work together on this? And so basically we sat down and said, okay, what number makes you comfortable enough to hang around to get into the cycle? We came up with a number. It was $10,000 or $15,000. And so we just did the math on the sales calculation, and we put a floor in on his commission and just said, okay, you have to sell X number of dollars before your commission starts hitting. We have to make sure that the business developer is comfortable enough to trust the process. If they're stressed by what their paycheck is until they get in cycle, they're not going to win. They're not going to be successful. And so just providing that support and being there when we need them. And that was another reason we hired the maintenance estimator. The maintenance estimator, at the end of the day, is really more like an inside sales support role as much as they're an estimator. It's just how you kind of word the title, and it's just providing that support so that they can go do what they do well.
Tim, before we go, is there anything else that you wish we covered today?
There are certain things that all landscape companies or all whatever trade companies just kind of have to do. But at the same time, do what you do well and understand where your strengths and weaknesses are. And if your business from an org chart perspective looks a little bit different than this guy's or looks a little bit different than this gal's, be comfortable, know what you're good at, trust yourself, and build the team that serves your business and your clients the best, and really trust that first and foremost. Don't be something that you're not, or don't be someone that you're not.
Well said. Well said. Tim Johnson, thank you so much for coming on Toolbox for the Trades.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time.